पुन्हा देऊ नंतरच्या उतरवतो.
Power says that no, this is my right to regulate your right. So you have to see how now this all flows from one constitution. Now while we are fought in this fight, we talk of fundamental rights, we talk of what the state can do, what the state should not do, but we often forget what we are also supposed to. And I was very happy to see that at the start of the event, there was a pamphlet which was circulated to all of us here. I hope everybody has had a cursory look at it at least. Mr. Prabhakar Dimle has done a fantastic job, and that was something which I wanted to touch last in my talk. On the last page of his pamphlet which he has circulated, he has mentioned about the fundamental duties, and that is something which we, every citizen, we owe to the state, which we owe to the country, and which is more often than not always forgotten. We only talk about our rights. What about our duties to the state? What about our duties to the nation? So if you see now, the constitution as it was framed was beautifully divided into three parts: our rights, states' rights and obligations, and while we talk of our rights, what are our duties? So this is what the constitution was to begin with. Then if you see the constitution, it talks of how this power has to be separated, because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, is an old saying. So the power should not be concentrated in one hand, it should not be concentrated at one center. And this applies equally to the legislature, which is one wing under the constitution, to the executive and to the judiciary. So absolute power to the judiciary becomes a big question of discomfort to the executive. If absolute power is given to executive, they will sit on the head of the judiciary. And if none of this works, and if you are given absolute power to legislate in the assembly or parliament, they can sit on the head of the executive as well as the judiciary. So how to separate these powers? So the constitution then went into this aspect of separating the powers and creating three different wings. And then the last part was, while we separate these powers have to be effectively channelized. So you had the center and the state, which was called the separation of powers. So this is what we know about the constitution, and finally we have the constitution in our hand. We read it every day. But how many of us know about the history of this constitution? Or what went into making of this constitution? There will be many speakers who come and talk about the finer aspects of how things are violated, etc. And since this gathering is more of the Congress gathering, I will start briefly, I'll be very brief, give you different things of how it moved and who are the persons responsible. And I'll devote a little bit of time to Babasaheb Ambedkar, because he was the founder, chairman of this commission. Somewhere in 1943, this concept of, in fact in 1933, the Congress as it then was, came up with this idea that now we are moving towards our independence. So there should be a supreme document which will guide us once we become independent. So the search for a supreme document started way back in the early 1930s. And that is where the thought had come. But nothing really went on from 1933. We had no idea how to move ahead. And nobody had anticipated at that point that India would go through the bleeding moment of a partition at that point of time. 1945, the World War had almost come to an end. And at that end of 1945 war, there was a Simla conference. This is where the thought of a real constitution came in the Congress's mind. And they said that we must work towards making Constitution Day, which is so important in our lives. No event in our life would be complete if we are not aware of what the Constitution gives us. We say that Constitution is the mother of all laws. We get all our rights from the Constitution. And this day would be incomplete if we don't honor Sri B.R. Ambedkar, who was the father of this Indian Constitution. Now, I'll just give a brief history. Sheikh Sir has already given a brief intro about how this Constitution Day has come into being. Initially, this Constitution started somewhere in 1946, the drafting. It took 3 long years. And finally, on 26th November 1949, this draft Constitution was conceptualized, the Constitution became ready, and finally, it was adopted on the Republic Day on 26 January 1950. But why this 26th November 1949 is so important? That was the day when the final copy of the Constitution was actually ready and which was signed by the eminent persons. Now, why is it so significant? And it goes with Babasaheb Ambedkar. He was the chairman of the drafting committee. We call him the father of the Indian Constitution. 2015 is a significant year. 26th November was always called as the Law Day, but something changed in 2015. 2015 was the 125th birth anniversary of Sri Bhimrao Ambedkar, fondly called as Babasaheb Ambedkar. And to commemorate this 125th birth anniversary of Ambedkar, the government of India declared that the entire year will be celebrated as 125th anniversary of Ambedkar. It also decided that we will have an Ambedkar memorial and we will have a statue in honor of Ambedkar. And it was at that time, in the year 2015, that the government declared that there could not be a greater honor to this man than to declare 26th November as the Constitution Day in his honor. That is how this term Constitution Day or Samvidhan Divas came into existence on 26th of November. Whereas earlier it was always called as Law Day. Now, today we talk a lot about Constitution. And when we talk of Constitution, we always talk about our rights. We say that our fundamental right is violated. We say that our right to speech is violated. Our right to expression is violated. Our right to property is violated. And we commonly use all these terms. की म्हजो हो रायटाचें उल्लंघन जालें, त्या रायटाचें उल्लंघन जालां. Now, from where do we get all these rights? These all rights come to us from this supreme document called the Constitution. And we all know that the Constitution exists. And we often fight so many matters in courts. And we have so many debates across, whether it is a political debate, it's a debate in the court of law, it is a debate between the executives. And we all then say ki hai amcha constitution and basana. So we all know that the Constitution exists. The Constitution gives us certain rights. Now, if we see, the Constitution is divided into different parts. First part of the Constitution talks about who is a citizen of India, kodang hai Constitution applies. And then we conveniently ignore that part and we focus only on the main part, which talks of all the rights available to citizens. आमी रोखडेच म्हणटा की ताका हो कायदो एक आनी म्हाका तोच कायदो दुसरो कित्याक. So we look at Article 14, which is violation of right to equality. Then there is Article 15, Article 16, dealing with different situations. Then we come to Article 19 and we immediately say freedom of speech, expression, freedom to have our own profession. You start a business. So in 1946, the thought of this constitution assembly originated on 13th of December 1946. And this thought was sparked by none other than Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So he said that we should come up with a blueprint which is called as an objectives resolution. And I'll quote his wordings. He said that India is a history of 5,000 years. And from the very dawn of that history, which might be considered almost the dawn of human history till today. So Pandit Nehru was trying to tell us that we have to now codify 5,000 years of history into a book. So how will we do it? But he said that we must do it because we want this document to be a model document for the rest of the world. Now Indian constitution is the longest constitution in the world. Why? Because it takes inspiration from Constitution of America, Constitution of England, inspiration from the Irish Constitution, from the Canadian Constitution, from the French Constitution. So these different constitutions, the best parts of this have been put together and made into this one document. Pandit Nehru's dream was to give India an independent sovereign republic and to give a document which earmarks these features. Now, as I told you, constitution is in different parts. Now, when India was under the British rule, we as citizens, if our rights were violated, we had to go to the courts which were there set up by the Britishers. We did not have access to Privy Council which used to sit in England. But all matters would travel to Privy Council and invariably we decided not so much in the Indians' favor. So the thought was, now if the Privy Council had to be done away with, we needed a court in India. So the first thought was, let us have something called as a federal court. Why I am telling this is because so many matters from Goa reach the Supreme Court. And we say Supreme Court is now the protector of the constitutional rights. So I'm giving a brief touch of how the Supreme Court came into existence. We had the Privy Council. We had to do away with the Privy Council with the entire court set up by the British government. So the thought was that let us set up a federal court. So in 1935, a federal court was set up. This is much before the Constituent Assembly also. But then they realized that this federal court was not dealing with the situations which we wanted as independent Indians. So again the thought was that we need a court better than a federal court which will deal with this situation, and we should have a centralized court, a Supreme Court. That time nobody thought that it would be actually coined as the Supreme Court. But they said that we want a Supreme Court. This is how initially the thought progressed. And then what happened was, India was going through a phase where there was so much bloodshed in history. We had so many wars. आमच्या राजांच्या मध्येच कितले वॉर झाले. Then we were fighting our battle for independence. So ही वेगळी हिस्ट्री आशिल्ली. And why this history is important? And how this framers of the constitution have taken this into account. त्या टायमार इंडियन वेगळे वेगळे रिलीजन्स आशिल्ले, वेगळे कास्ट आशिल्ले. सोशल बॅकग्राऊंड सगळ्यांचो वेगळो वेगळो आशिल्लो. आता इतले सगळ्या लोकांचे राइट्स कशे प्रोटेक्ट करपाचे. And we were now trying to give a document which is the first document आणि हातूंतल्यान आता हे सगळे राइट रेग्युलेट जातात. So this Constituent Assembly was framed, and in the Constituent Assembly we had very important persons. The first important person in this assembly was none other than Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. Now I'll just briefly read about him because that is what is important. He came from a very low background. He initially was from Satara, which many of us may not know. And from Satara, the family moved to Bombay. Then he finished his education in Elphinstone College, and he then moved into coming into social life. He was a very popular person in Mumbai. He became a councillor, and then once he gained popularity as a councillor, he then came into the Bombay Legislative Assembly between 1924 to 1934. Then he was appointed as a lecturer in various colleges. And finally, he was elected to the Constituent Assembly from Bengal in the year 1947. But in this time, he was a very knowledgeable person. He had knowledge of law, philosophy, literature. If you see his biography, you couldn't say that there was something lacking in his degree, in his education. And therefore, he was made the chairman. And along with Babasaheb Ambedkar, who was the chairman, there were notable persons. I just mentioned three. One was Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyer, one was K.M. Munshi, and then there was Benegal Narsingh Rao or P.N. Rao. Now, Babasaheb Ambedkar, he chaired this committee. Why these other persons were important? They say that B.N. Rao, he was so good in his work. He compared the constitutions of different countries, and his grasping power was so strong. To do this, we immediately challenge, saying that how can the government stop me while somebody else is doing similar business? So all these questions come in our mind, and we say that there is a violation of all these rights. And for us as a citizen, the constitution is more focused on violation of those sacred rights which we feel are very supreme to us. But we also forget that the constitution is not just that. The constitution also deals with something called as the directive principles of state policy, which is equally important as much as citizen rights, which are protected from Article 14 to maybe Article 32. These directive principles are also important because it puts the duty on the state and says what the state should do for
Dignitaries of the days, President of the PCC, my colleagues,
म्हणले जे म्हादईबद्दल आनीक रस्ते बाकीचे सरकाराचे हितून एका गव्हर्नराक इंटरव्यून जावन तुवें हें करचें म्हणटा तें एक्झॅक्टली कितें म्हणलें
See, there is जे कर्नाटकान आमगेली जी मादे माया, which we call our mother. These are आमकां म्हाका दिसता हें to protect this. We asked the Honorable Governor that he should head a all-party delegation, and we should go at the side. So he should intervene using his constitutional right. And I think it is the need of the hour. It is in the interest of Goa and Goans. This is our only lifeline that is left. So I am confident that the Honorable Governor will impress upon the government and instruct them. We had gone with a delegation as Congress party with several issues. Unemployment we had several things done. And unemployment जे म्हाका दिसता नीति आयोगाचो जो रिपोर्ट हा, Goa is one of the highest unemployed states. So definitely हुई ना हुई, the government needs to tackle this. This is a serious issue. Thirdly, जे आमी मांडला जे IIT चे, I think there is several other lands and cultivable land जे सांग्याच्या गांवांत हा, शेतकार भायर सरला. People and the government should not come on तेंगे पोटा आड येवपाक शिरू. सो हे मुद्दे आमी जे मांडले आनी हांवें गव्हर्नराकूय दिवं बरोबर म्हणलां, कित्याक ही जी यात्रा संपूर्ण यात्रा जी केली, म्हाका दिसता कॅन्सराच्या डायलिसिसाच्या पेशंटाक जायतो आदार जालो. आमचे कॉन्स्टिट्युन्सी जेन्ना तो आयलो तेन्ना म्हाका दिसता आमचे चिफ्टन मेमोरियल जे आहा हिस्टॉरीक प्लेस ताका थिंगा ताणें मान दिलो हांव ताका देव बरें करूं म्हणटा की ताणें हेजे एक बरो प्रोग्राम केला म्हणून.
सर तुम्ही नीती आयोगाचे म्हटले पण नीती आयोग स्वतः मिनिस्टरान म्हटलं की
See, that is the data given by the central government. Wrong, they should clarify with the central government.
But Yuriba, it was the right platform to bring this issue right now.
Definitely, no, these are people's issues, and I feel that there are several memorandums and referendums given to the Honorable Governor. They have been given by the Panchayat members, they have been given. So definitely as opposition, we will definitely raise issues pertaining to Goa. We congratulated him as well. So issue we have to highlight. It is my role as leader of opposition to highlight these issues. These are all, every one of you all know that they are there. Madhaiche je zata that you all have seen. It is there.
But WRD minister is saying that nothing such thing is going on.
See, then it is better that we take an all-party delegation and go there. That is what I asked the Honorable Governor. That to impress upon the Chief Minister so that he gets his part. Tegelo Chief Minister Karnataka. So Sarkar, आज BJP इंगा तिंगाई BJP तो हा केंद्रा को हा. So why that injustice on Goa?
थँक्यू सर.
बांदून दवरतात ते म्हाका दिसता आज खंय तरी इट इज अंडर अटॅक. आतां कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन कितें संविधान कितें हे डिटेल एक्सप्लेन करपाक आज आमचे एमिनंट टीम स्पीकर हे इन डिटेलान उलयतले. तांचे वळख करून तुमकां दिता. पयले आसात एडवोकेट क्लिओफात कुतिनो. म्हाका दिसता सगळे जाण तांकां वळखता आसतले.
पूण यंदा कॉम्पिटिशन आणि तुम्ही जे तुम्ही या गव्हर्नर कशा पद्धतीने
I think he is a very good person, very good human being. When you hear, you can see his thoughts. He speaks perfectly in line with our constitutional ideals and values. आणि म्हाका दिसता तो गांवां विजीट केलो तेन्ना though he has a limited role as a governor, but he has taken down the problems, difficulties आणि आमच्या लोकांचे कितें आसा aspirations, आणि I think he has also forwarded it to the government for taking necessary action.
तुमचं लिडर ऑफ द ऑपोजिशन युरीन एक कांय प्रश्न मांडले म्हादई बद्दल रस्ते आनी बाकीचे इश्यू आसा ते इंटरव्यून जावन गव्हर्नरान तितून लक्ष दिलें.
पळय कितें जाता प्रेफरन्स तुमी जाणात आनी आमी जाणात स्वता रुलींग पार्टी करता आनी मागीर एक ऑपोजिशन आयना निराश. सो इट इज अ गुड थिंग दॅट ही हॅज मेड दिस
to my mind, not only to celebrate the visit to various villages and helping the people who are in need, but more than that, I find it an exercise to impart, to teach people, to make people understand the importance of helping others, understand the importance of the values of compassion and kindness, understand the importance of the need to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. So from that angle, to me, it is highly inspiring and very valuable. Thank you.